Oregon, a state known for pioneers and rugged individualism, a state known for its advocacy of personal liberty, and a state with a secret past of a major infringement on human rights. Between the years 1917 and 1983, in one of the least well-known and most disturbing periods of the state's history, over 2,000 people in Oregon had one of the most personal and fundamental of rights taken from them, the ability to have children. Oregon's eugenics reform movement was used to sterilize not only the mentally deficient, but also the unwanted, even if they were fit in mind and body. (1883) Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, is published, spreading the revolutionary ideas of evolution and survival of the fittest. One of the many influenced by Darwin is his cousin, Sir Francis Galton, a British scientist. Galton applied Darwin's ideas to humans, concluding that certain undesirable traits can and should be bred out of the human race. He names this idea eugenics from the Greek eugenes, or well-born. He begins the Eugenics Society of Great Britain, feeding off of people's deep-seated desire to feel that they are special or superior to others. His ideas quickly spread to America, where the public, especially the progressives, latch onto the idea. The movement is led by Charles Davenport, a prominent American biologist who starts and leads the Eugenics Record Office. Following World War I, America sees an exodus of rural dwellers flocking to the cities. The 1920 census shows that, for the first time in its history, more Americans live in urban areas than in rural areas. The average American now comes into contact with more of the undesirable population, the feeble-minded, criminal, sexually promiscuous, and insane. Searching for answers to fix these problems and the reasons behind them, progressives settle on eugenics, as it gives them easy answers to these difficult questions. 1909, the first attempt at a law establishing forced sterilization in Oregon, which is advocated heavily by Bethina Owens Adair, a respected doctor and female rights activist, is vetoed by Governor George Chamberlain. In 1913, another Oregon sterilization law is passed, but is forced to referendum and dies with 56% of the population voting against it. This law makes a comeback in both 1917 and 1919, but is both times deemed unconstitutional. Finally, in 1922, a revolutionary eugenics bill is passed, and the Oregon Board of Eugenics is founded to hear the cases of those considered for sterilization. Though the law appears to be fair, fallbacks allow the board to do what it wants. Owens Adair wrote, "We put no one before the board without first obtaining the consent of their parents or guardian. The law was designed to allow the board to order such an operation without the consent of the parents." Because the board wanted to appear legitimate, they did generally acquire the consent of the person to be operated on, or their guardian. However, the manner in which consent was acquired was questionable. Many did not understand what they were signing, and some were told they were signing something else entirely. Some patients were threatened with never being able to leave the institution if they didn't comply. Whatever method was employed, the result was almost always the same: consent for the sterilization to proceed. By itself, the Board of Eugenics and the 1922 law may have disillusioned the public in Oregon, as stories of threats and brutality would have become known, but the board had several important supporters. First among them, Dr. Owens Adair, a respected progressive-thinking reformer who concentrated on women's rights and eugenics. Owens Adair was one of the state's earliest female doctors, and as the women's rights movement progressed, her reputation and the respect accorded her likewise grew. Another advocate was the Oregonian, the state's most important newspaper. Its editors made it clear where they stood on the issue in 1921 when they wrote, "6 persons in every 10, happily unconscious to the fact, are meandering through life with the mental equipment of childhood." Oregonians weren't unanimous in their support for eugenics, though. In fact, Oregon was home to the only anti-eugenics organization in the United States, the Anti-Sterilization League, headed by Laura Little and based in Portland. A major reason the early eugenics laws didn't pass or were repealed was that the Anti-Sterilization League forced referendums. Ultimately, the League was too much of a minority and couldn't stop the eugenicists with their powerful backers and the science community behind them. Another reason the League didn't succeed in the end was also one of the main reasons the League had done so well: Laura Little. She was opposed to eugenics not on an ethical level, but due rather to her mistrust of science and the medical community as a whole. who at this time were experimenting with drastic measures to treat the mentally ill. One of Little's own children had died after receiving a vaccine, making her believe contemporary medicine was evil. But as the general public's trust in science grew, Little became less influential, leading to the defeat of the League in 1922. Oregon wasn't alone in the nation. At least 27 states issued and enforced sterilization laws. Oregon doesn't stand out because of the sheer amount of people that were sterilized. California led the country with over 20,000 sterilizations. But three things mainly set Oregon's law apart. It specifically targeted homosexuals because they were seen as sexually perverted. Further, the preferred method of sterilization for men was castration, even after other, less invasive ways were developed. And finally, that it was only repealed in 1983, the last such law in the nation to exist. But, despite promises by eugenicists to positively impact the human race, the sterilization laws in the United States had a major impact on the world, greater and more terrible than anyone could have ever imagined. The Nazi government openly admitted that their racial cleansing program, established in 1933 and focused on removing the feeble-minded, criminals, and Jews in Germany, was based extensively on those used in the United States. The Nazis did in fact follow almost exactly the same process used in the US. The only difference was the scale. In Nazi Germany, over 350,000 people were sterilized between 1933 and 1945, while the number in the US was markedly smaller, around 65,000 people. Only recently have states begun to acknowledge their part in sterilizations. In 2002, Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber issued a formal apology for the state's sterilization law, only the second one to do so, following Virginia, the state that was home to the monumental Buck v. Bell Supreme Court case, in which feeble-minded Carrie Buck's sterilization was upheld. Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes affirmed the value of Virginia's law in order to prevent the nation from being swamped with incompetence. This case set the precedent for the constitutionality of eugenics laws nationwide. Since 2002, only 2 other states have issued official apologies. Eugenics has had less obvious repercussions as well. At its core, the pseudoscience of eugenics is blatantly racist. The mind frame of eugenicists, that people of Nordic races were superior in every way to others, especially Africans or Asians, fostered persistent racist beliefs, with scientific claims that minorities were less intelligent than whites. Because these beliefs were encouraged by noted scientists, even to the point of being published in high school and college textbooks, they became accepted as fact. The acceptance of this idea of racial superiority is a major reason why an end to racism is still considered by many to be just a dream. Because Oregon's law was kept in the books the longest, and Oregon preferred to use violating forms of sterilization, Oregon may be said to have caused the greatest infringements on personal liberties, even though other states perpetrated more total sterilizations. Over the long term, this approach to disabilities, both real and perceived, led to an overall cheapening of life, which may have led to key Supreme Court decisions and the passage of laws that deny the full personhood of those who are mentally deficient, afflicted with Down syndrome, or are unwanted, even if they are fit in mind and body. Ultimately, the great pseudoscience of eugenics, embraced by the progressive movement for the self-direction of human evolution, has left behind a legacy that has harmed the human race by its idealistic and misguided attempts to improve it.